Hello friends, glad to have you join us today on our devotion. We're starting a new series of devotionals around the truth surrounding what God called the rest of Sabbath. And we're going to be looking a little bit about how to find productive fruitfulness while we rest. The basic understanding that we must have is that all of the work that God does is by faith. This is the teaching of 1 Timothy 1 verse 4, where Paul says, God's work is by faith. And anything that we aim to achieve, if we want it to stand the test of time and the test of fire that the scriptures say everything is going to be salted with, everything done in faith will stand for eternity, but efforts that are made without faith will fail, no matter how prolific they are. And God's work was always done by faith, and our work for God similarly must be built in faith. Without faith, the scripture says, you cannot please God. So let me tell you the story of Cain and Abel. In the story of Cain and Abel, they sat with their parents outside the garden. And they were in a desolate land because God had cursed the ground because of the sin of Adam. And with painful toil, it produced thorns and thistles. No more the lush garden that they were used to. And they would sit around the campfire at night hearing the stories of Adam and Eve about how they used to walk with God and how God looked upon them with favor and how they walked in His presence and how beautiful the garden was. And the stories were astounding to the boys. And they began to wonder, what would it be like? And so they decided, let's come together and let's bring sacrifices. Maybe God will draw near to us. And so that's what they planned to do. And they set a date, and Cain went out. Cain was a worker of the soil, and he worked hard, early in the morning, late at night, working the ground, working painfully, sweating, and it produced a little bit of fruit. Abel, he went out and looked after his flocks and relaxed until the time came when it was the opportunity to offer. And when they came to bring their sacrifices, Cain brought in what was an abundance and an inspiring amount of sweat equity represented in the amount of food that he brought. And everybody who looked at that knew that that was many, many, many hours of hard labor. And Abel brought the blood and some of the parts of the body of an animal that he had sacrificed, because that's how God had done it when He'd clothed his parents, and he put his faith in that. And when God drew near, He found Abel's sacrifice acceptable, but He didn't look in favor with Cain's offering. And that was astounding. And from that we learned this principle: God doesn't like man's sweat on His sacrifice. Hebrews 11 verse 4 says, by faith Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. And by faith he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith Abel still speaks even though he is dead. Do you know that Abel is still speaking today to anybody who will listen? And the message of Abel is that faith will improve your offering. Hard work alone will not find God's favor. Now believe me, I understand and celebrate hard work. That's a beautiful thing. But every act that is prompted by faith is delightful to God. Every act that's combined with unbelief, even though it may be many months or years of sweat and painful toil, are not the same if they're not combined with faith. And what faith it took for Abel to work less than his brother and still bring a sacrifice, because he knew that's what God wanted of him. God doesn't like man's sweat on his sacrifices, but He loves the sacrifices that have been marinated in faith. So my question to you today is, what faith steps is the Lord asking of you? What is He asking you to do? It is not the frenetic activity. It's not the amount of what you're doing that counts. It's how much are you doing of what God has spoken to you, and how much are you doing that you're adding faith to. Faith is the key ingredient to action, and it's the thing that God finds most acceptable. In this opportunity for us to rest a little, why don't you rest a little, find peace, and do those things that you find faith in, because God will be pleased with them. We miss you so much. We're looking forward to seeing you again. We're praying for you every day. God bless you.